Nothing feels better than winning when people are patiently waiting to see you fail.
Dan Bilzerian had it all. Private jets, mansions, millions in the bank, and a lifestyle most people only dream of.
I beat one guy for 54 million. I won 10 and a half in another night. I beat another guy for 10.
To the outside world, he was untouchable, a living legend who seemed unstoppable. But what the cameras didn't show, and what even the biggest fans couldn't see, was that every empire built on illusion has cracks. And in the years that followed, the man who sold the fantasy of unlimited wealth,
he claims to have won over $50 million in 1 year of playing poker,
would face the harshest reality of all, watching the myth of himself slowly crumble. This isn't a story about bad cards, unlucky hands, or rivals at the table. This is a story about the downfall of a man who thought he could have it all, and the invisible forces that proved otherwise. You see, Dan Bilzerian didn't just appear out of nowhere with private jets and poker chips. His story starts in excess, tension, and a childhood that looked perfect from the outside, but felt anything but on the inside. He was born in Tampa, Florida, in 1980, and raised in a sprawling mansion that sounded more like a theme park than a family home. Indoor courts, private lakes, wild luxury at every turn. His father, Paul Bilzerian, was brilliant, aggressive, and always chasing massive deals. On paper, the family had everything: money, intelligence, status. In reality, Dan grew up lonely, overlooked, and constantly on edge. Paul Bilzerian was a force of nature, a former troublemaker turned Harvard-trained dealmaker who lived at full throttle and brought chaos with him. When he was home, his presence was oppressive. When he was gone, his absence was just as loud. Dan later admitted this lack of attention shaped him deeply. Everything changed when Dan was 10. His father unexpectedly drove him to school and casually mentioned he was going to prison, convicted of stock and tax fraud tied to market manipulation. Overnight, the family's power collapsed. At school, Dan became a target and responded by rebelling against authority. Expulsions followed, 2 schools in 1 year, a military academy after that. Eventually, the family relocated to Utah, hoping for a clean slate. Instead, things spiraled further. Dan showed up to school with a military-grade weapon in his car, claiming it was a family keepsake. Authorities didn't see it that way. This time, the message was clear: leave the state and don't come back. With nowhere else to go, Dan joined the Navy and trained for the SEALs. The discipline suited him, but injuries ended that chapter early. He left honorably discharged and enrolled at the University of Florida, studying business and criminology. Despite a steady disability allowance, he managed to burn through his money and hit rock bottom. With no access to family wealth, he sold off his prized gun collection just to survive. That desperation flipped a switch. With just $750 left, he sat down at a poker table. Slowly, methodically, he built it into $10,000. Then, he went all in on himself, buying a one-way ticket to Las Vegas and turning that bankroll into nearly $200,000. Poker stopped being a gamble and became a weapon. He returned to school, but his nights belonged to high-stakes cash games. The money grew fast, too fast for classrooms to make sense anymore. When you're making in a week what professors make in years, priorities change. He dropped out and leaned fully into the underground poker world. By 2007, he was showing up to elite games with suitcases full of cash. Surprisingly, he played cautiously, frustrating opponents who expected a reckless rich kid. Tournament poker didn't love him back, though. Public results exposed limits that private games could hide. Still, within poker circles, many insiders believed his real money came from exclusive, off-the-record games where reputations mattered more than trophies. Then Instagram happened. Between 2013 and 2014, Bilzerian's lifestyle went viral. Jets, guns, yachts, models. It was excess turned into content. Media outlets ran with the legend, repeating the idea that poker built it all. Even without major professional credentials, he became poker's most recognizable face. But as Dan Bilzerian's profile grew, so did the size of his claims. Suddenly, he wasn't just a rich guy who played poker on the side, he was everywhere, loudly insisting he'd made tens of millions at the table. Headlines crowned him a 9-figure poker playboy, and social media ran with it. But once the spotlight got bright enough, people started asking the obvious question: where did all this money really come from? This was the first crack in the illusion. Not because anyone had proof, but because belief started to fade. And for a man whose power depended on perception, doubt was already a form of collapse. Bilzerian has always maintained the same line. He says he didn't touch a single dollar from his father's trust fund until he was 35, long after he was already living large. According to him, poker was the source of everything. The problem is that very few people in the poker world actually believe that story. To understand the doubt, you have to go back again to his father. When he got out of prison, he technically owed the U.S. government millions. That money was never recovered. Instead, the family's wealth seemed to dissolve into a maze of shell companies, offshore accounts, and bizarre transactions.
He's the son of convicted corporate fraudster Paul Bilzerian.
At one point, the family mansion passed through so many layers that part of it ended up owned by a charity named after the family cat. Meanwhile, Paul officially reported having almost nothing to his name, down to a prison account holding just a few cents. So when Dan insisted his wealth wasn't inherited, skepticism followed him everywhere. His poker skills didn't exactly silence the critics either. In 2017, pro player Doug Polk reviewed footage of Dan playing online and came away unimpressed. Aggressive, sure, but sloppy, inconsistent, and far from elite. It only fueled the idea that Bilzerian's reputation didn't match his results. Then came the stories. In 2019, Dan claimed he once won nearly $13 million over just 3 poker games, describing stakes so massive they barely exist outside private rooms. He talked about blinds higher than the buy-ins at the most famous casinos in the world, opponents betting luxury cars, and stacks of cash so big they stopped feeling real. It was dramatic, cinematic, and almost too perfect. For seasoned pros, the math didn't add up. Wins that large, that fast, are almost unheard of in modern poker. Around the same time, Bilzerian began reshaping the narrative. He claimed he pioneered the loose, aggressive style now common among top players, even though that strategy existed long before he ever sat at a high-stakes table. More interestingly, he admitted something else. The trust fund rumor was useful. Whether it was true or not didn't matter. Letting people believe he was a spoiled rich kid helped him get invited into private games where the competition was softer and the money easier.
How, you may ask, does this billionaire playboy philanthropist finance his life?
While the poker debate raged on, cracks began to show elsewhere. Maintaining his viral lifestyle wasn't cheap, and much of it was being funded by his company, Ignite. Marketed as a global lifestyle brand, Ignite bled money fast. By 2019, it had reportedly lost around $50 million.
I think Ignite is dead in the water. We're just waiting for the official announcement. They have no cash.
Much of it spent on extravagant personal expenses disguised as marketing. Lawsuits, whistleblowers, and leaked details revealed yachts, mansions, and luxury toys all charged to the company. By the time the dust settled, the question hanging over Dan Bilzerian wasn't about poker hands or strategy anymore. It was simpler and harsher. Was the man who built his fame on endless wealth actually running out of it? And was the image he sold the world ever real to begin with? By the time Dan turned 40 in December 2020, he was still playing the same game he'd mastered for years, staying loud, controversial, and right at the center of attention. He marked the milestone by joining GG Poker, launching a flashy $100,000 birthday free roll, and declaring that recreational players, not cold, analytical pros, were the future of poker. It fit his image perfectly. Poker to him wasn't about spreadsheets or theory, it was about swagger, big money, and bigger personalities. But not long after, the the conversation drifted away from poker apps and towards something far more explosive. Rumors began circulating about a potential heads-up match between Bilzerian and billionaire Alec Gores, a game so massive it sounded almost fictional. According to Bilzerian, this wasn't some fantasy matchup. It was the rematch of a private rivalry that had already made him tens of millions.
How much money have you made playing poker?
I don't know.
In his book and later podcast appearances, Bilzerian claimed Gores had personally reached out to him to play ultra-high-stakes poker at his Bel Air mansion. The early sessions were already extreme, with blinds in the thousands and buy-ins that could bankrupt most people instantly. Bilzerian said he walked away from that first night up over $1 million. As the games continued, the stakes ballooned into territory almost no one ever sees. He described winning, losing, rebuying, and swinging millions in a single sitting, including one brutal high-card flip worth more than many people will earn in a lifetime. According to Bilzerian, despite some massive losses along the way, he ultimately took more than $40 million from Gores. That's where things got tense. Gores reportedly wasn't happy about being publicly named or about the numbers being shared. What followed, at least in Bilzerian's telling, was a challenge that could dwarf everything that came before. A $100 million heads-up match, winner take all. Bilzerian claimed he was ready. He said he could wire his $50 million share, even offered to televise the match. But as months passed, nothing materialized. Critics called it a publicity stunt. Bilzerian insisted the other side was stalling. The money, he said, was ready. The game just wasn't happening. Around the same time, Bilzerian found himself under pressure from another angle. On Doug Polk's podcast, he was pushed harder than usual about the one question that never goes away. How did he actually build his bankroll? Polk, a respected professional with a reputation for calling things as he sees them, pressed for details. Online results, early wins, proof. Bilzerian's answers circled back to the same themes. He talked about grinding online, winning big months, then graduating to private games filled with ultra-wealthy amateurs who didn't really know how to play. He insisted those games were where the real money was made. Polk eventually acknowledged that Bilzerian likely did win millions in private games. Still, the biggest mystery remained unresolved: how he got the money to sit in those games in the first place.
Where did Dan get his money from?
And that was the real downfall. Not losing money, but losing credibility. Because in poker, once people stop trusting your story, the game is already over. Meanwhile, his relationship with GG Poker quietly unraveled. By 2022, Bilzerian was out. The partnership had always been controversial, and criticism followed him from day one. Bilzerian later brushed it off as a lack of interest and claimed the money wasn't worth the effort. Behind the scenes, he said affiliate payments never matched expectations, and the deal simply faded away. Even as doors closed, Bilzerian stayed defiant. He made it clear he didn't care for most of the poker world, distancing himself from professionals while keeping a tight inner circle of elite players he respected. His image remained intact to his fans, untouchable, unapologetic, and still living the dream.